Do you actually think David is still alive? Maya asked as I strapped on a fresh tank of trimix gas. Though slightly heavier, it would allow us to reach for greater depths within the caves without running the risk of nitrogen narcosis. Not a lot of time has passed since our quick ascent back to the surface, and though it hardly sufficed for a second dive, we didn't have time to waste. I'm sorry, Maya, but I don't think so, I said. I saw him get taken. By what? There was something else down there in the water. I couldn't tell you what it was, and I'm not sure I even want the answer to that question. Maya turned to Andrew for confirmation. He strapped some tape around his knee, which ached after the rapid descent. He was eavesdropping on our conversation. He noticed Maya's trepidation in returning to the depths, worried more of us might perish in the effort. It'll be fine, he said, with an odd sense of confidence. I wouldn't ask you to do this unless I truly believed David was alive. Just let me go first. If something goes wrong down there, just turn back and leave. Don't risk your life on my count. Though the words felt genuine, they weren't directed at me. There was still a prominent sense of resentment hanging in the air between the two of us. But, having no choice but to work with me, Andrew attached himself to the cable without further quarrel and initiated a second descent into the depths below. Once he was out of sight, Maya got ready to follow, purposefully placing herself between Andrew and I in a futile attempt at preventing further conflict. I pulled her aside, not ready to let her descend unless she knew the exact risks involved in the mission. You don't have to do this, Maya, I said. I can do this alone with Andrew. She shook her head. David was my friend too. If he's alive, I have to try. I understand, but this is going to be dangerous. I just need you to know that, I explained, noting her use of past tense in describing our lost crewman. Of course I know. David wouldn't have gotten lost if it wasn't dangerous. I'm aware of the risks, Rick. Just let me go. I couldn't stop you even if I tried, I chuckled, trying to brighten the mood. But Andrew is going first on this one. I just need you to watch out around him. If he tries going too deep again, don't follow. It's not worth the risk. She gave me a gentle nod before attaching herself to the cable. A second descent had started, and she kept eye contact with me until the very moment she got enveloped in the darkness. I was the last in line, being spared the struggle of leadership following my nitrogen narcosis. Still, I followed the two of them down into the caves, not sure if any of us would ever return. Hit by the freezing temperature of the water once again, I let out a few gasps in shock as I prepared to submerge. I quickly inserted my mouthpiece, letting the trimix gas fill my lungs as I dove under. Attached to my belt hung the end of the safety line we attached during our prior trip. Through it, we'd be able to send our video and audio feed in lieu of wireless connections. Though direct contact remained impossible, at least the surface crew would know what happened to us should we fail to resurface. We followed the northwestern passage again, quickly descending with the aid of the safety line, not needing to think twice about the paths we could take. But even though we'd been down there only an hour or so prior, the atmosphere within the tunnels had noticeably changed. The same fleshy growths we encountered last time had reached much shallower parts of the cave. Worried, I pointed them out to Maya and Andrew, signaling as best I could not to touch them under any circumstances. They both nodded in agreement, and we carefully proceeded downwards into the pit. We were completely surrounded by the growths, narrowing the lumen even further, as if the walls were progressively closing in on each other. It made it almost impossible to traverse without disturbing the vines, causing us to graze them on many occasions. Luckily, the smaller ones just retracted into the wall without prompting an attack. It appeared that only the thick, well-developed growths maintained the ability to harm. Even so, total avoidance remained our chosen strategy. Next, we delved into the open chamber. As before, the vast emptiness hung below us, a harrowing sight without a visible end. Transfixed, I felt shivers crawling down my spine, wondering what kind of nightmares existed in the depths. Checking my dive computer, I noted that we returned to 200 feet below the surface. Had we still carried nitrox tanks, we'd have started to experience the advanced stages of nitrogen narcosis. But with Trimix, we still had quite a distance to go. For now, we remained safe. At the front of our pack floated Andrew, unimpressed and unbothered by the abyss below. His mind was fixated only on the strange light emerging from the hole in the wall. But at least this time, he waited for the rest of us to follow him deeper into the caves. He would frequently turn around and wave for us to hurry up and join him, never straying out of sight. Though I appreciated the sentiment, I wasn't sure if it was a strategy of self-preservation or teamwork. But as I made my way towards the opening, something down in the depths caught my attention, just barely visible from the absolute deepest part of the chamber. There, several hundred feet below, I noticed several cold blue lights dangling in the water, almost dancing around each other in a captivating symphony. A loud rumble emerged from their origin like an ancient voice crying out into the void. I glanced at my team, wanting to wildly gesture and announce my discovery, but my body refused to cooperate, paralyzed by the distressing sight below. The more I stared, the more I felt my body succumb to an unknown force. I tensed up, frozen from a sense of dread that only increased the further I descended. While Maya and Andrew had headed straight for the cave, I fell behind, unable to drag my gaze away from the depths. I started to sink, so desperately trying to fight back. But instead of fearing my incoming demise, I felt oddly relaxed, almost welcoming death as a dear old friend. My depth gauge counted up, quickly reaching 300 feet, 310, 320. In mere minutes, I'd be overcome with narcosis, leaving my body forever in the depths. But before reaching the point of no return, both Maya and Andrew rushed over to pull me back to shallower parts. Breaking the line of sight with the lights, I finally snapped back to attention, trying to convey what I'd just seen with body language alone. But it was no use. And once I glanced back down, the lights quickly faded away. I had been lured in by their glow and would have diligently sunk to my death if not for the quick intervention from my team. Confused, I tried to refocus on the mission. I followed Andrew back towards the opening in the cave wall, ready to figure out if the place truly held an oxygen bubble that could have kept David and the young boy alive. Gone were the claustrophobic halls of the Northwestern Passage. Instead, we followed the current into a large tunnel filled with beautiful, warm light. It emerged from plant-like structures on the wall, stems extending with yellow bulbs at the end. Each bulb covered in hair-like protrusions wriggling around the water, snatching up small particles. Like the vines on the wall, their touch resembled that of exposed muscle, clearly a part of the same ecosystem as the flesh vines. We hovered in the light, in awe of its beauty. Though seemingly harmless, we tried our best to refrain from touching them, though an occasional graze still occurred without consequence. For a moment, we just existed in their world, experiencing a delightful sense of peace, as if the dangers of the depth no longer posed a threat. But with our residual pressure gauge slowly ticking down, we decided to keep moving, floating through the brightly lit hallway. The malignant vines still existed among the lights, but appeared to be held back by the glowing bulbs. Only a few dared to stretch out into the tunnel's lumen, looking for anything that might float by. In the distance, an odd reflection appeared on the cave ceiling, one we immediately recognized as the water's surface. Against all odds, an air pocket had formed in the waterlogged caves, existing in almost impossible conditions. But whether the gases within were breathable was a question left unanswered. All we could do was pray as we proceeded with haste, clinging onto the slim possibility of David still being alive. But something happened as we neared the surface, a change almost imperceivable at first, as if the lights were starting to dim. Maya was the first to take note, turning around to assess the situation. Sure enough, the bulbs that had basked us in warmth only moments before were starting to retract into the wall, causing the cave to progressively darken. And as they pulled back, the vines started to emerge en masse. Within mere seconds, the cave opening had completely closed up by the sheer number of vines, blocking our only escape route. With each passing second, more of the bulbs folded in on themselves, allowing more vines to fill the lumen. Only then did we realize that the entire passage was about to close up. Either we breached the surface immediately, or we'd get entangled in the flesh-bound organism. Panic rising within us, we quickly swam for the surface, which was still some distance away. All the while, the vines grew thicker and more numerous, moving towards us at impressive speeds. Andrew led the rush, glancing back at us to make sure we hadn't fallen behind. But in doing so, he hadn't noticed vines appearing directly in front of him. Too slow to react, he was grabbed by the appendage, which subsequently started wrapping itself around his shoulder. He pulled his knife out and swiftly slashed through the vine, to which the rest of them responded by sending dozens, all of which wrapped around Andrew. I rushed over to him, pulling out my knife, slashing at the flesh. But there were just too many of them, and before long, I too was trapped in the entanglement, immediately immobilized by the vine's surprising strength. Maya remained as the sole free diver, but the vines were quickly reaching for her too. One of them managed to get a hold of her head, ripping out her mouthpiece in the process, which vanished in the chaos. Running out of air, Maya panicked as she desperately searched for it on the floor, but it was no use. Using the last of my mobility, I pointed to the surface, signaling for her to leave us behind and save herself. She locked eyes with me, shaking her head, and started pulling on the vines with her bare hands as they slowly tried to squeeze the life from us. It was futile. Sorrow filling her eyes, Maya was left with no choice but to rush for the surface, not knowing if the air above could sustain human life. The tendrils wrapped tighter around us, some starting to stab through the suit, digging into my flesh. I wanted to scream, but I fought to keep my mouthpiece in place, lest I drown in the hellscape I voluntarily entered. But with the pressure building up around me, and the pain growing in intensity, I felt myself fading away. The last thing I saw before finally losing consciousness was Maya escaping up into the air pocket, the only one not ensnared. All which would follow was eternal darkness. It's an odd sensation to feel your life slipping away. I had expected flashes to appear before my eyes, filled with highlights and mistakes from a life gone by. But instead, I was left with only a single thought occupying my fading mind. Had I chosen the right way to die, or should I have spit out my mouthpiece and let the cold water take over my body? As a diver, I was well acquainted with the concept of drowning, and as horrific as the idea might be, it's a risk you take each and every time you dive beneath the ocean's surface. You're trapped underwater, knowing that the minuscule amount of air left in your lungs amounts to the very last breath you'll ever take. Even should you welcome your premature death, your body fights with all of its instincts, down to the very last second. It refuses to let you inhale, tensing up to prevent water from entering your lungs. You start to notice the oxygen in your blood diminishing, replaced by an unrelenting feeling of sheer panic as your muscles start to burn and your mind turns hazy. Little by little, you fade into the darkness, left with only the knowledge that you're about to die. Then, as you finally fade into an unconscious haven, the true nightmare begins. Your body falls back in pure instinct, making one last attempt at gasping for air, except there is none to be found. You open your mouth, pulling in the icy water encasing your body, knowing fully well that it'll only hurt you more. This is the point where your experience might differ, as 1 in 10 people react violently to the water entering their bodies. As soon as it hits your larynx, it closes up, refusing to let neither air nor water inside. There are the people that suffocate, drowning without a single drop of water touching their lungs. The remaining 9 in 10 people suffer a different fate, allowing water to wash inside, causing an immense feeling of burning on every surface the water touches. A jolt of adrenaline is released, your body's way of begging for you to keep fighting the inevitable death. And only then are you finally allowed to slip away, sinking into unknown depths as your body ceases to function. Burdened with this intimate knowledge of drowning, I had chosen to keep my mouthpiece, allowing my death to come from ensnarement. Had I made the right choice? Death should have already taken hold of me, but yet my spirit remained firmly locked within my body. I opened my eyes, not sure how much time had passed, wondering how I hadn't yet succumbed to my captor. The passage had long since fallen dark in lieu of the glowing bulbs, leaving only the beam from my flashlight to light up the wall before me, where a dozen vines floated in the water, content to have caught its prey. A shadow appeared before the beam, one not recognizable by my tired eyes. It was only when it came right up against my face before I realized it was Maya. At first, I thought I was dreaming, my dying mind hallucinating an impossible rescue. But there she hung, wearing a mouthpiece, cutting me free from the entanglement. Several of the vines had already dug themselves into my body, and though Maya tried to pull them out, they refused to budge. She could only cut them away, leaving their stems still ingrained in my body. How she managed to extract me without waking up more of the appendages, I didn't know. But she had managed to free both me and Andrew, getting both of us up into the air pocket above. "It's safe. You can breathe here," she said as she pulled out her mouthpiece. We had been pulled up into an air-filled chamber, covered in a much denser set of the same fleshy growths. Maya stepped between them, making sure not to touch their hostile appendages. But without water surrounding them, they appeared more docile, making few attempts at latching onto us. "How did you?" I began to ask, not needing to finish the question, before Maya gestured to an air-filled passage extending deeper into the air pocket. Before it lay pieces of diving equipment, identical to ours. It was David's, but the man himself was nowhere to be seen. "It was fused with the vines. I had to cut it all out. I just took his mouthpiece and came back for you," she explained. "What about David?" Andrew asked. Maya shook her head. "I don't know, but it doesn't matter anymore," she said somberly. "What do you mean?" I asked. "It took me over an hour to get you loose. Even if we find David, we won't have enough air to get back to the surface. We're trapped," she responded, her voice breaking towards the end of the sentence. I glanced at my residual pressure gauge, and sure enough, only a fourth of the gas remained. Andrew confirmed. None of us had the faintest chance of getting back to the surface. We were starting to realize that though we survived the attack, we'd been tossed into a different kind of tomb altogether. "What about the cave?" Andrew asked. "David clearly made it up here. He might have followed the path to another exit." Though hopeful, it wouldn't be a likely solution. Seeing as we hadn't died immediately from decompression, the air held the same atmospheric pressure as the water, which meant the air inside the cave had no connection to the air on the surface. The question was, where did the oxygen come from, and how long would it last? "I don't know where it leads," Maya said. "I was busy saving your sorry asses, and that I greatly appreciate, but..." Andrew started, only to be cut off by a pained groan. "What's wrong?" I asked. "The vines," he said, inspecting his wounds. "Huh, that's..." There were large holes covering his suit where the vines had penetrated. But despite the many wounds, there was a surprising lack of blood. Upon closer inspection, we realized that each hole still had pieces of the organism stuck inside, seeming to have fused with the surrounding skin. Checking my own body, I realized that I, too, had patches of flesh that didn't belong to me, fused to my skin. "What the hell is this shit?" I asked. Andrew didn't respond, seemingly intrigued by the injuries we sustained. "So, that's how it is," he muttered to himself. "What was that?" I asked, but got no response. "We're alive. Let's focus on that," I said. Andrew just nodded, unbothered by the strange growths attached to his body. "So, do we have a plan?" he asked. "Not really," Maya said. "But we also don't have any options." "Except for following the cave," I let out. We glanced at David's abandoned diving equipment, wondering why he left it all behind. If the man had attempted to traverse the cave, the question remained how far it extended. Whatever the case, it was our best and only possibility. And though our chances of survival remained slim, we clung onto that hope for dear life. I detached the safety line from my suit, letting my camera transmit the last bit of footage before going dark. Though not improving our chances, I felt slightly better knowing the surface crew knew what had happened to us. At least our story would exist to be told, and it might prevent others from meeting the same tragic fate as us.
Well, here goes nothing,
Maya said.
Who wants to go first?
With nothing more than our flashlight to guide our path, I took the first step into the dark passage. Like the waterlogged tunnels below, the walls and floor were covered in the flesh-bound growths, ready to ensnare us by the smallest provocation. Though more docile above water, we refrained from coming into contact with them. Maya pushed her way past me, quickly assessing the many wounds that covered my body.
You really thought I'd let you go first? You're a mess. Both of you, in fact. I'm taking the lead on this one,
she demanded. I glanced back at Andrew, who seemed surprisingly content with the idea of someone else leading the charge. He just nodded in agreement, rubbing the foreign flesh fused to his body. A knot formed in my stomach as soon as we entered the passage, only to immediately realize that it sloped downwards. The only semblance of hope left was extinguished as we were forced further down into the abyss. With no way of knowing the exact gas content of our surroundings, we had no way of knowing how the increase in pressure would affect us. Maya led the group with purpose, marching on without hesitation into the deeper sections of the passage. Though narrow, it was tall enough for the ceiling to be obscured in darkness. Andrew moved at a slower pace, purposefully falling behind to get a moment alone with me, so that he could ask about our shared experience in the entanglement.
Does it hurt?
He asked. I hadn't thought about it since we started walking, but as I focused on it, I realized that the immense aching I'd felt less than an hour prior had completely vanished.
Actually, it doesn't,
I let out, surprised.
But you feel something, don't you?
He went on. Puzzled at first, I tried to focus on any changes in my body. Only then did I realize just how healthy I actually felt. Despite the many cuts, stabs, and bruises, I didn't feel wounded. Quite the opposite. I felt stronger than usual, amped up like my body was running on pure adrenaline, but without the accompanying jitter. I just stared back at Andrew, speechless, to which he responded with a subtle smirk.
Interesting, huh?
He asked.
Interesting isn't exactly the word I'd use.
But Andrew didn't stop there. He seemed almost gleeful to be infected by the foreign tissue, as if he held answers that I still wasn't privy to. It creeped me out, but I couldn't deny the physical comfort I felt with the creature existing within me, as much as the thought itself disgusted me.
What do you remember from the entanglement?
He asked.
I don't know. I passed out. I only woke up when Maya had freed me,
I explained.
I didn't,
Andrew said, almost proud.
I was awake for the whole thing. What did you see?
I finally caved and asked. He shot me a smile, one with genuine happiness, rid of all malice.
Something beautiful. What was it?
He'd gotten me genuinely curious, with a side of anxiety prevalent in my chest. The way he spoke just felt off. It lacked the fear that should have been present, considering the dangers we were in.
If I told you that, Rick, you wouldn't believe it. But once you see it for yourself, you'll understand what I mean.
With that cryptic statement, Maya had noticed our hushed conversation and paused to interject.
What are you two on about? Nothing,
I automatically responded, worried she'd think we'd gone mad, a question I was starting to ask myself.
Well, save your breaths for walking,
she ordered.
We don't know how much oxygen this place has. Fair enough,
Andrew said, continuing to appear unbothered by the situation we found ourselves in. We must have walked in silence for half an hour before the cave finally opened up into another large chamber. Like the rest, the floor, walls, and ceiling were covered in small growths, interspersed with small, dimly growing plants. In the middle of the room lay another bizarre structure, a meat flower stretching up with flaps of flesh and a crown of tendrils. Something was occupying its middle, an object we only recognized once we got closer. It was David, lying lifeless in the middle, his body dissected and hardly recognizable.
Oh, God!
Maya let out, rushing to his side. I joined quickly after, but Andrew remained in the back, staring at the remains of what had once been his colleague, showing no form of distress.
He's dead.
I let out, stating the obvious. His body had been torn to pieces, most of his face removed and his innards absorbed by the fleshy structures. Several of the appendages appeared to have dug into his body, as if trying to connect with him. In the process, he had bled out, at which point his body had been mostly digested and absorbed by the organism. There was nothing left to be done for him.
Fuck!
Maya cried.
What the hell is this place?
Having sensed our presence, the tendril still attached to David's body started to let go. At first, we didn't notice it, distracted by the loss of our friend. But no sooner had they let go when they chose new targets. With Maya being the closest to David's remains, she'd become the primary object of their desires. It was a fact I realized all too late, as the tendril struck at her, just barely missing as Andrew jumped to pull her away.
Watch it!
He yelled as he pulled her to the floor with him, just nearly dodging the appendages. Maya, while gasping for air in panic, remained unharmed.
You all right?
He asked as he lifted her back to her feet.
Yeah,
She said in shock.
thank you, Andrew. Don't mention it.
I remained by the strange growth in the middle of the room, staring at the wriggly flesh that had tried to murder Maya, yet had left me be. Andrew might have saved her, but had made no attempt at removing me from the situation, as if he knew only Maya would be at risk. To test the theory, and in a moment of profoundly stupid bravery, I took a step closer to the tendrils. With that, they stopped wriggling, just turning to me as if inspecting my body. I moved closer, allowing them to get a better grasp of who and what I was. They seemed oddly interested in the parts fused to my body, carefully inching closer without striking out violently.
Rick, get away from them!
Maya yelled, moving to physically remove me, only to be held back by Andrew.
Let me go!
She screamed.
No, he needs to do this.
Andrew explained confidently. But their argument didn't even faze me. I was too hypnotized by the tendrils before me. I felt drawn to them, connected by an unseen force, as if letting them touch me was my one true destiny.
Rick!
Maya kept yelling, punching Andrew to no avail.
You'll be fine, trust me.
Andrew said. Then it connected, attaching itself to the growth still attached to my wounds from the entanglement. Within an instant, I felt my mind dissolve from my body, leaving it behind as I entered an entirely new experience of life itself. Gone were the physical boundaries of my human form, joining forces with the organism within the cave. I could feel every inch of the cave around me, see through eyes in the wall, each harvested from those unfortunate enough to fall victims to the vines. Miles and miles of twists and turns, hidden below the entirety of Darwell Woods, stretching far beyond. It was all there for me to see. So much death, so much life, a fragile equilibrium under threat of an unknown, evil entity so far away. In the span of just seconds, I saw 1,000 images of 1,000 places, all within the cave, entire ecosystems existing in a parasitic symbiosis, death and life merged to one. And then I saw the depths, the same pit I had seen in the underwater chamber, extending endlessly far into an infinite abyss. Down there, even I had no sensation. Yet there was something else, unknown, existing in the depths, the same blue lights I saw before, and they terrified me to my very core. My mind moved back to the air-filled caves spiraling down, observing each inch in mere seconds, and amidst it all, I saw the child, hidden in the deepest pit of the cave, trapped in the fleshy growths. That's where my domain ended, a part of the hybrid I stood no chance of accessing, controlled by a creature far stronger, more ancient than anything known to man. But despite it all, I now knew exactly where to find it. As abruptly as the journey had begun, I felt my mind retract into my body. The tendrils detached, and I fell powerless on the floor, gasping for air.
Rick!
I heard, muffled in the distance as Maya pulled me away.
He's alive! Welcome back,
Andrew said, not surprised in the slightest.
I saw him.
I managed to get out between breaths.
What? Who?
Maya asked.
The boy. He's alive.
I continued.
Where is he?
Andrew asked.
The center. He's at the center.
I let out, still struggling to breathe. Confused, Maya looked to Andrew for answers, but even he didn't seem certain.
What's he talking about?
Maya asked.
I actually have no idea,
he responded. Once I'd gotten my breath back, Andrew and Maya helped me to my feet. It took a while, but I slowly started to feel at home in my own body, as if the excursion through the flesh had been nothing but a dream, but one leaving hidden knowledge not meant for mankind.
Is this what you meant?
I asked Andrew.
This is what you saw in the entanglement?
He shook his head.
What I saw was a mere glimpse compared to you,
he explained.
You've been chosen. Chosen for what?
I asked, annoyed at the constant riddles.
I have absolutely no idea. That is a journey for you alone to find out. I'm not here to find myself, Andrew. I'm here to save that kid. I saw him. I know where he is. How is this even possible?
Maya asked.
I don't know. It's like these things showed me. I could feel everything while connected. It was weird,
I explained.
And you can lead us to the center?
Andrew asked.
I can. Then what are we waiting for? Lead the way.
Andrew went on, just a tad too enthusiastic. Nevertheless, we started moving. With a freshly printed map of the place ingrained into my own mind, I knew each twist and turn we had to follow to reach our destination. It was a trek that would take hours, down to extreme depths that we might not be able to withstand, but we had to try. I took the lead, unnaturally energized by the connection I'd felt. Andrew was just as excited, walking by my side, while Maya grew weaker, the first to experience the signs of increased pressure. Why and how Andrew and I could withstand it could only be explained by the fused growths to our bodies.
What did it feel like?
Andrew asked, once we'd gotten ahead of Maya.
Strange,
I said, not wishing to delve into the subject any further.
Do you understand it now? What this place is?
He went on.
I don't care what this place is. All I care about is getting that kid, and getting the hell out of here,
I insisted. Andrew paused, staring at me with a semblance of shock in his eyes.
Are you sure you want to do that, Rick?
He asked.
Do what? Leave,
he said.
Because I don't think you do. I think you understand the importance of this place, and having seen what you saw, there's no going back. You are one with this place, just like me.
Though I couldn't understand what he meant, I did understand exactly how he felt. Since escaping the clutches of the entanglement, I had lost all sense of fear of the place we stood within. I felt at home, as if I finally existed in a place I belonged. But it was a feeling I couldn't accept, and one I had to push aside if I wanted to stand any chance of saving the child.
Did you know what would happen to me when you let me connect with the tendrils?
I asked.
Or did you just let me dive in to see what would happen?
I asked.
You already know the answer to that. Then why pull Maya away? Hell, why didn't you dive in yourself? Because Maya would have died, and I wasn't chosen. But you already know that. Why are you trying so hard to deny yourself this? Why are you so desperate to leave?
Andrew argued. Before I could answer that question, Maya interjected.
I know I'm slow, but I'm not deaf or stupid, so I have to ask. Have you fucking lost your mind? You want us to stay down here?
Andrew turned to her, sighing carefully before answering the question.
I'm not asking you to stay, Maya. And once we reach the center, you have my word. I'll do everything in my power to get you back home. But I'm staying, and I think Rick will too once he comes to his senses. Is he serious?
Maya asked me, gesturing to Andrew.
I don't know what he is, but I'm not staying in this hellscape. Now stop the chatter. I don't want to hear another word,
I ordered. Andrew lifted his hands in defeat, keeping his mouth shut. With peace finally present in the cave, we could proceed further into the depths. As we walked, I glanced down at my depth gauge, which rapidly counted up to well over 500 feet. At those depths, any gas resembling trimix would have caused severe narcosis, which meant the gas filling the cave must have been closer to helinox. But with our voices not taking on the comedically high pitch caused by helium inhalation, the composition remained unknown, able to keep us alive despite the pressure. But with Maya growing weaker, the trip was taking far longer than estimated. The only bright side was that it gave us time to think and observe our morbid surroundings. I started noticing pieces of human and animal anatomy spread across the walls. Eyes, ears, organs, vessels, all seemingly extracted as spare parts for the cave wall.
Is that a gas tank?
Maya asked as she noticed a bit of metal sticking out from the wall, partially submerged beneath the flesh.
Looks like it. But it's a model from several decades ago,
I went on.
1974 to be exact,
Andrew chimed in, pointing out some text written on its side.
So, I guess we're not the first ones down here,
Maya said.
but hopefully the last,
I said, hoping to end the discussion. Let's keep moving. With the increasing depths, the growths on the wall grew thicker, covering every inch of visible surface. It squished beneath our feet as we progressed, periodically trying to snatch onto Maya, while leaving Andrew and I alone. We'd been integrated into the symbiotic system, recognized as part of the cave, but Maya still hadn't been connected, a process she stood no chance to survive.
Hold on a moment,
Maya said, out of breath. The pressure was getting to her, a process she was desperately trying to fight without success. She sat down on the least dense part of the cave, trying to catch her breath as the vines reached up to grab her.
How far is it to the center?
Andrew asked, showing genuine concern towards Maya's condition.
This passage takes us straight to the chamber. Only a 15-minute walk left,
I explained, gesturing to one of the many tunnels in the wall.
And that's where we'll find the kid?
Maya asked between breaths. I nodded.
What exactly are you planning to do when you find him?
Andrew asked.
What do you mean? You want to free him, right? How do you intend to achieve that? Seeing as he's been merged with the flesh, reaching a stage far beyond whatever happened to us in the water.
He went on.
We'll use Maya's knife to cut him loose. Worked for us,
I explained. Andrew sighed, not convinced by my plan.
I'm not sure I can let you do that, Rick. What the fuck are you on about? Do you not really see what this place is? After all this time? If you free the boy without a replacement, everything in these caves is going to die.
I locked eyes with the man, wondering if the last bit of humanity he held on to had vanished from his soul.
Let it die then,
I said as coldly as I could. Maya struggled to get back on her feet, discomforted by the conversation. I let her get behind me, getting ready to proceed into the cave before Andrew kept the argument going.
I won't let you do it,
he said.
I just can't. Well, fuck you, Andrew,
I yelled.
Stay as long as you want, but we're saving that kid and getting the hell out of here.
I turned my back to him in protest, proceeding deeper into the cave. I made sure to let Maya get some headway, but as I took my first step into the narrower passage, I felt a heavy hit to the back of my head. Sent pummeling to the ground, I was dazed by a newly formed wound on my head. I turned around on the ground, met by Andrew standing above me with a knife in his hand. He hit me with its handle, attempting to stop me without actually murdering me.
I thought you dropped that in the cave,
I said, more surprised than afraid.
David didn't need his anymore,
Andrew explained.
So I got a spare.
Reacting quickly, Maya launched at Andrew, punching him in the face. Though it connected, the punch barely moved him. He just remained in place while Maya threw another punch, one that did little due to her weakened state.
There's no need for that,
he said calmly. But she struck again, this time getting blocked. Andrew grabbed Maya by her neck, pushing her against the cave wall, covered in flesh. Upon making contact, dozens of vines started to wrap around her, causing her to sink into the wall until only her head was visible. All the while, she struggled to get free to no avail.
Relax, Maya. They won't hurt you. I made sure of that. I promised to get you out of here once we reached the center. I'm a man of my word. I won't let anything down here hurt you,
he said confidently. But I can't let Rick destroy this place. Leaving her entangled in the wall, he approached me, now wielding his knife with intent to kill. He held the knife close to my chest, bending down on one knee next to me.
If this place dies,
he began, but it was a sentence I didn't let him finish. Instead, I kicked him in his weakened knee, instantly sending him groaning to the ground. Still dazed, I got to my feet, jumping on top of him to stop him from rising. Though much larger than I, he was in too much pain to fight back. Punching him in the nose, I managed to get him to drop the knife. For the next few seconds, we rolled around on the ground while I tried to get the upper hand. But once the shock from the pain had worn off, Andrew quickly regained control. He punched me in the face a couple of times before diving for the knife on the ground.
I don't want to hurt you, Rick, but I will if I have to,
Andrew said, pointing the knife back at me. I charged at him again, grabbing onto his knife-wielding arm. I tried to tear it from his hands, but he wouldn't let go.
Last chance!
He groaned in the struggle, but I refused to let up. He started pushing it towards me, slowly but certainly inching its way towards my guts. I felt the blade tear through the suit and cut into my skin. The adrenaline coursing through my veins wasn't enough to fight the shock of having a piece of metal stabbing through me. I felt my grip on Andrew's arm weaken, and before long, I fell limply to the ground, unable to fight on. He loomed over me as I pressed against my wound, feeling the warmth of my own blood pour down my abdomen as I slowly bled out.
I didn't want this, but you left me no choice,
he said.
Fuck you!
I shot back, using what little remained of my strength. My vision started to blur, and the pain just kept worsening. I felt the ground beneath me start to move, tiny veins pulling their way up my body. A sharp shock shot through my body as I felt the appendages dig their way into my wound. I screamed in agony, but alongside the pain, I felt something odd begin to take hold around me. I could feel the room around me, each and every tendril. I waited, almost hoping for Andrew to finish the job by slitting my throat, but he seemed frozen.
Stop it!
He let out. I tried to focus my vision, just barely seeing Andrew getting ensnared by the growths in the cave. They wrapped tightly around his legs, growing upwards at impressive speeds. Along the way, they dug themselves into his flesh, causing him to scream. He fell to his knees, allowing further growths to dig themselves into his torso, tearing him apart from the inside. His cries turned to gargles as blood filled his lungs, and within seconds, he had been reduced to a pile of mangled meat, fusing with the cave walls.
Rick!
I heard Maya yell, the wall around her retracting as she was freed. Then the tendrils released from my wound, pulling quietly back into the ground, leaving me with a gaping wound in my abdomen. I had been spared, even saved by the same monstrosity we'd been fighting, but it was a rescue that would be short-lived, as blood continued to pour out onto the ground.
Oh, my God!
She let out as she realized how badly I'd been injured.
I'm fine,
I lied.
Help me up.
Trying to conceal the pain I was in, I let Maya pull me up. Before us lay an unrecognizable mess of human remains that had once been Andrew. I bent down, muttering a few profanities as I picked up the blood-covered knife.
The cave,
Maya began, trying to comprehend what had just happened.
Why would it save you? I don't know, but we have to keep moving. We don't have much time,
I said.
Come on, it's not far.
Weak, but unwilling to surrender, we proceeded through the last set of tunnels towards the heart of the cave. The passage twisted and turned before finally ending in a massive chamber lit up by thousands of glowing plants. In the middle stood a large flesh-bound monolith, pulsating akin to a beating heart. At its base hung the small body of a young child, fused with the flesh. No sooner had we entered than I fell to my knees, weakened by the blood loss. I struggled to get back up, noticing the connection I had once felt to the cave start to fade. In the presence of a new, far stronger being, I was being discarded.
Is he alive?
Maya asked. I nodded. Though appearing dead, I had felt his life surging through the flesh. What remained was only the question of how to release him.
What now? We'll cut him free,
I said. As I uttered those words, the ground beneath us abruptly woke to life, wrapping around us in an instant. We tried to fight it, but in our collective, weakened state, we didn't stand a chance. After all this, we reached the end, only to be effortlessly neutralized.
Do not touch the child.
A deep voice rumbled from all around us, as if the walls themselves had spoken to us.
What the hell was that?
Maya asked.
I am the warden of this domain. You do not belong here.
The voice went on.
Let us go.
Maya argued as the ground started swallowing her knife.
Let you go. You have no power here. With what can you bargain?
The child in the flesh spoke in unison with the walls, his tiny voice barely present. I stopped fighting, knowing any form of protest would be futile.
But this one is different.
The warden said, referring to me.
It has been assimilated, yet it does not understand.
Well, I couldn't understand what he meant. The more the flesh wrapped around us, the more I could start to feel the cave skin within my mind again. Its vast intelligence, its emotions, its memories.
What is this place?
I asked, sounding surprisingly calm.
This is the last bastion of life.
The warden explained matter-of-factly.
You call this life? All the people that have been killed, and for what? We saw the bodies!
Maya screamed.
Killed.
The warden asked.
Your feeble concept of morality won't serve your cause down here. Those dead were the sacrifices needed to keep the depths quiet. We required their flesh. We required their knowledge.
It went on. The emotions within the being were foreign, most of them not following concepts known to mankind. And though the sensations overwhelmed me, one emotion stood above all, prominent in each corner of the cave. Fear.
Why are you afraid?
I asked.
We fear the lights.
It responded.
What lights? These plants?
Maya asked.
We fear the lights in the depths, looming beneath us, and soon they will rise.
A flash of the waterlogged chamber emerged in my mind, filled with blue lights hanging hundreds of feet below. Even when connected to the flesh, I could not access that region of the cave, as if it was a separate entity to the organism itself. But what they were, and why the warden feared it, remained an unanswered question. But with time running out, and the life slowly draining from my body, my thoughts turned to the child, and how we could free him. The warden needed a suitable body to keep the place alive, as Andrew had said. And each life taken in the name of the cave had been to find one strong enough to sustain the place without perishing. Those who were incompatible had only been absorbed as spare parts, victims of a dire necessity masked as evil. Then I realized why the cave had saved me over Andrew, because my connection to the place stood unparalleled. I was chosen. With that realization, I felt the flesh loosen around me. I fell to the ground, free, as did Maya. She gasped for air, finally able to take a deep breath free of the constraints.
Why did you let us go?
She asked, surprised. But it was a question I already knew the answer to.
Rick?
I stared at the child, knowing what choice I had to make. Someone had to take his place, and that person could only be me. If I gave myself to the cave, it would free the child.
Maya, I need you to get the kid out of here,
I said.
But I don't... What's going on?
She asked.
I'm staying,
I said.
Are you insane? You can't! It's the only way the warden will let the child go,
I argued.
Someone has to take him back home. I don't even know how to get back out,
she said.
Don't worry about that. This place will show you the way.
Tears filled her eyes, both from fear and sorrow.
I can't just leave you.
I gestured to my wound.
I wouldn't make it back even if I wanted to.
In the end, Andrew had gotten exactly what he wanted. I was staying. I reached out to hug Maya, whispering that it would be all right. She didn't respond. She just held on to me in doubt. For a while, we just stood in embrace before the warden spoke up for the last time.
This place can sustain your mind, but your body will perish. Be quick, before that too is lost.
The flesh loosened around the boy, letting him fall limply to the ground. Where the tendrils had been fused, mere marks remained. He was unconscious, but definitely alive. Feeling my body surrender under its own weight, I stumbled over to the fleshy monolith, grabbing onto it as I gave Maya one last glance. Then I connected, my body slowly sinking into the organism, becoming one with it. With that, I gained full control. I could open a path back to the entrance, and I could keep them both alive as they were transported to the surface. Maya lifted up the boy, looking me in the eyes as my body started to disintegrate. In only a minute, the body I once had would be fused with all those lost in the cave. But it was something I could gladly sacrifice, knowing they were getting back home. Using the last of my voice, I just asked Maya to tell my story, to let the world know that parts of me still exist, and to leave this place alone. After all, the evil committed was little more than an act of desperation to keep a far greater threat from emerging from the depths. But even though I am staying back to fight an unknown enemy, I have a feeling this nightmare is far from over. I will do my best, but a time will come where this place will fall. And once it does, the world as you know it will cease to exist. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.